Welcome, everybody, to this advanced spiritual perspective and the 2024 series for building a bridge between the spiritual and material worlds. Today's first lecture out of a series of 6 that will go on parallel to the building a bridge between material and spiritual worlds in our Sacred Self-Healing group will deal with the fundamentals of electrification and etherization. And in the process, we will illuminate some of the esoteric principles that are needed to be understood. They are needed as a prerequisite to contextualize, what we're talking about in a way that allows you to, let's say, not feel scared or not feel that doom and gloom is going to come all over us. This is not the intention, and therefore my disclaimer here, this lecture series is not suitable for the untrained mind. Okay, you guys all know me. My name is Jona Bryndis, and this workshop series that we have going on for the general public in the Sacred Self-Healing community deals with overcoming issues with awakening, overcoming issues with perception, overcoming issues with fear, doubt, apathy, money and material security, and issues in relationships. Here in this workshop or lecture and workshop series, we want to dive a little deeper into the deeper understanding of etherization, a word that I have mentioned many times in my previous lectures, and electrification. For that, we will dive into some of the fundamentals, some of the principles, the nature of spiritual realms. Just to cover that, we'll have to talk about the cycle of life and death and the evolution of soul, or our soul. We will go on to discuss and examine the nature of the natural, the earthly, the material realm, as well as in lecture 4, the nature of the supernatural, spiritual realms. And then in lecture 5, the nature of the subnatural, the lower spiritual realms. And then lastly, we will dive deeper into the inversion of our natural evolution, of our divine evolution, that we are basically all programmed or seeded with. That is our divine nature. So these 6 workshops, in this 6-part workshop, we will discuss issues and try to better understand current events from a spiritual perspective. And we're going to start out with this. We're going to start out with the discussion. You can already mentally prepare for that. What we see as the problems in our world right now and what we could do about them or how to counteract them. So we do want to have always also the practical part, namely our part in all this, just the mere fact that we have an awareness, just the mere fact that we are concerned about these things qualifies us to have our own thoughts and basically also create and choose our own intention as to which part, which role we want to play in this. Today, we are not going to get very far, very deep with this. We're going to cover the ground. We're going to be discussing those societal conditions once more. And we're going to form a few vocabulary agreements. So spiritual lingo is quite diverse. There is no real spiritual language that we have. We have lots of different ancient teachings that come from the Chinese, that come from the Vedic, that come from the Persian, from the Egyptian, the Roman, the Germanic realm. And we're going to try to form our own spiritual lexicon here. Yeah. For those of you who follow this workshop series, we're going to build like a real nice sort of way of talking about all these things. We're going to illuminate the esoteric concepts that are needed to understand electrification and etherization. Here, just real quick, so that you already understand where this is going. The etherization is basically the representation of our natural evolution, of our soul's ascension path, if you will, and electrification would be the inversion of that, the concept of our soul's devolution. This is a very, very simplistic way of, laying out something for you that you basically don't really read or see anywhere compiled like this. The only place where you can find, say, like the fundamentals laid out in the way that I have chosen to lay them out is in anthroposophy, not theosophy, not Vedic or Buddhic or even Christian traditions. So Christian science would probably be the closest to what it is that we are using here as a framework. We always need to have a framework for things so that we can make sure we're all talking about the same things. We will briefly illuminate the nature of spiritual forces. This is something that we have already done last year in my lecture series, Understanding the Nature of Darkness. And we are, or want to, come up with something like a practical meaning of all of this. So once more here, my disclaimer, guys, it's not for the faint-hearted. We're going to go into the nitty-gritty of things, applied, advanced spiritual understanding. Yeah, so if this is not resonating with you, if this is something that you would rather not think about, then don't feel bad, because this is something that requires basically all the teachings that I've been laying out for the last 15 years. So if you followed last year's lecture series, the mastering of the thinking, the feeling, the choosing, and your energetic conditions, those 16 workshops, you have a good foundation. And most of you, I can see this by the names that are here, most of you were there or participated in some way. So you guys here, my live audience, should be prepared for this. In the beginning, I said, it's not for the untrained mind. It's not for the unprepared person. Yeah, but anybody who watches this, maybe because somebody's sharing a video or gets hold of these unlisted YouTube links, needs to know this. All right, guys. Let's start out with a discussion. So I'm going to turn myself off here now and focus on the slides. Let's start out with a discussion with you, all right, by contemplating the question, what do you see? How do you feel about what is happening to humanity today? Zoom out a little bit. I'm not asking you about your personal life right now. I'm asking you what you are seeing is happening to humanity nowadays. To bring it back to the question, what you're seeing is that there's, war going on a level that affects people's ability to connect with themselves, or at least, from your perspective, from your personal perspective, due to the ties that you have, is affecting you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just, I'm worried about the people in my life and how they might go down rabbit holes with it. That's my only fear.
Okay. So this would be something that you're observing, okay? Maybe that people are going down rabbit holes
Yes,
because
thank
of
you.
the lack of connection, or because of you know, the things, outer things that affect them. Okay.
It's scary, but it's not my fear. I just fear for the people around me and how they're gonna might act out, which I can't control, you know? So it's the fear of not being able to control, but is not there anymore because it's overtaken by whatever you want to call it, mass media or whatever. I don't want to give it too much attention, but you know what I mean. I
So would
feel.
this be a second aspect, the fear that is that you perceive that is going through the collective, and that is
Correct.
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, so those are the concerns, and we can say that this is what's happening in in humanity or in our collective today. There's more presence of war and also a higher level of fear or anxiousness about the future. What else?
I am going to chime in.
Yes.
Hi. There's also a very high level of people just checking out,
Okay.
just not even dealing with all of the things that are getting thrown at all of us.
Cindy, do you think it's a chicken and an egg problem? Do you think it's because more people are checking out that we're seeing all these things in the world today, or is it because we're seeing all these things in the world today and they become more and more overwhelming for people that they are checking out more? Which way around do you think it is? Or do you think it's a chicken or the egg
I think it's a
dilemma?
chicken or egg because that could go either way on any given day, really.
Hmm. So, but the
But
checking out
yeah,
is concerning to you because what does this mean? So when people checking out, what do you think that means for
it means
humanity?
that their awareness is not with them. They're not in the present moment. And I'm speaking from my own experience as well. If
Yes,
I don't
please.
pay attention to it,
Please.
this is what happens.
Hmm.
People have accidents. If you don't inhabit your space, something else will.
Have you guys noticed this too? Just in the last week, the number of accidents that I've seen is crazy.
Yes, I almost actually had one yesterday, and I'm like, oh my goodness,
Yeah,
reel
it's
yourself in.
yeah.
Yeah, I've been seeing like on the same road every day, ambulances and police for a week now on the same road. It's just bizarre.
Hmm.
So this is what I'm talking about exactly.
Hmm. So there's a like the checked outness, you know, makes people more prone to well, more negative experiences, really,
Yes.
right?
Hypervigilance as well, I feel. Sorry, Yona.
So that
That's a
would be
new.
the other side. So either the checking out or the other extreme, the hypervigilance.
I think it would
Yes.
depend on the individual, really. They could go. It could. It's both an extreme that I've experienced, that I've got experience with. So it could be both
Hmm. What else are
easily.
you? What else are you observing in the world today?
Yeah, hey, Yona, this is Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi. The biggest thing I've noticed and was thinking about is the level of confusion, and by that it's the amount of things that are unclear to people, but
Uh,
yet there's also this feeling and sense of, but there's some kind of clarification just below the surface, and so this confusion that at least in my area and in who I've been around, that's what I've noticed is people are actually digging a little deeper and they're actually asking questions and they're really wanting to look at something else.
okay.
And
Hmm.
so to me, I'm finding this sense and space of hopefulness um,
Okay.
in in regards to, despite all of these other things
I see that
that
too.
that's, but yeah, you know how you can, but you can still understand that there's all of this confusion and
Hmm.
it's happening to everybody at the same time. So you have some folks that are very confused by feeling deceived. You have some folks that feel like, oh wait, maybe I went too far out there on some hypervigilance. So it kind of goes along with what Sean and Cindy are talking about in terms of, and then that's the part where depending on how well you are managing your own energy and what have you, you either become overwhelmed and check out because you're exhausted, or you just really can't look at anything anymore. You just can't.
Yeah, the exhaustion. So confusion
Mhm.
and exhaustion, whatever causes the exhaustion, we're going to investigate this a little more here down the road, as we go through these different workshops. But I agree with you, Sheila. And I also see the positive side. Yeah, I mean, here we are, talking about spirituality for over 20 years, dealing with our personal issues of coming out in regard to our spirituality. And all of a sudden, we're waking up to a world where, or sounded like a conspiracy theory, is suddenly true. Okay, we're waking up to a world where, even people that were sort of hardcore materialists, all of a sudden asking questions, yeah, or doubting sort of let's say that the mainstream or legacy media narratives. Okay, so there's something going on here, yeah, there's something going on. But the confusion is real, yeah, so it's not really a consensus. There's not really unity among humans. There's, if anything, and I was actually kind of hoping that one of you would share that, if anything, we see a stronger polarization. Yeah? The world has, our societies, they've more or less split into two themes almost. Now, it seems a bit more prevalent here in the United States, where we have a partisan system, political system, okay, where there really is, just red or blue as a choice. But even when we think of the framework of good guys and bad guys, yeah, so I guess the war in Israel is a really, really good example, where the polarization is super visible. And if you zoom out, it's really difficult to say, who are the good guys or who are the bad guys. Yeah, the world is no longer that simple. Yeah, things have become much more complex. And at this point in time, here in the early 21st century, it appears as that this confusion is creating polarization among people. Yeah, polarization, like a splitting into opposites. Yeah, as opposed to, like, for example, yeah, realizing that there are greater issues that we have to resolve as humanity, as an entire collective, and joining forces and working on those together, right? I mean, it's barely, something that crosses our mind because it doesn't really fit into the current paradigm. But if you zoom out a little bit, you realize, okay, most of the issues that we're having here nowadays, and we just really looked at things here from a sort of perspective of an spiritually awakened person, but there's lots of practical issues that we're having in our world right now, that we haven't even talked about. What are some of the practical issues that you see? What do you worry about when you worry about the future?
I'm just confused about the way I reach out without losing my sense of self, basically.
Okay. Yeah, so that plays along, with the unity or the lack thereof. There is, it's very difficult to see, belonging. Yeah, so it's one of our karmic issues here that we brought into this lifetime, that we never really felt we belonged to any of these polarized groups. Okay, so we see ourselves as out, not necessarily outcasts, but like outliers, okay, or fringe dwellers. So yeah, that's what you perceive as the biggest problem for humanity. What are some other issues? I'm expecting things like environmental issues, political issues, all these things that we're dealing with that overwhelm us so much, that make us check out, that make us ask questions, just to pick up on the things that you have mentioned. What are these things that overwhelm people? What are these issues?
Jona, I think that have always tried to stay pretty neutral with the whole political stuff, but being in the United States and probably most places anymore, it's impossible almost to, I mean, we can stay there, but there comes this point where we're kind of at, which is you constantly feel pushed into making a decision or a choice, even though you know that neither of these choices are the choices you want to make. And so to me, it goes with that unity piece. And it's really the constant struggle that it seems like we're all going through is how do we incorporate individualism, which is fine and dandy when we're trying to express ourselves as a true self, for example, and then how do you collaborate when those things don't match with maybe another true self's journey? And this political stuff just keeps it's like it keeps cracking open that bottle.
Okay, so that's
we have to look
relationship
at it.
but among humans. That's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
like how is dividing us?
Together. Yes. And how do we work together from being taught to you only work together, that's the only way, or you have to be individual and you only get your way, which means you don't work together. Yeah. So, I imagine this is what it looks like. Everybody's struggling with, well, how do I still express myself as an individual, but yet try to collaborate on something that is of a bigger nature that is important to all of us. And people are struggling to have the skill to do that.
That's an excellent point you're making there, Sheila, because this is actually what leads us to understand why we have to include the spiritual perspective. Okay, so if we look at it just from, like a 3D perspective, we cannot find a solution. Okay, right. So there needs to be a larger perspective on things to understand one another, yeah, in our commonalities, in what connects us, yeah, and what makes us the same, even though we're all unique. Without that understanding, yeah, without understanding, for example, what it means to be human, because that connects us, all right? Yeah, this is a larger perspective, okay? It's very difficult for us at this point in time to get past our differences, yeah, be it opinions or be it racial or gender or political issues, or economic or, like aspects of lifestyle and whatnot. So what you're saying is that what you see as the biggest problem is to build a bridge between humans. Yeah, to, like regardless of race or regardless of gender or regardless of political affiliation or regardless of, your lifestyle choices or what else? Yeah, regardless of these things, to find a common denominator, to find something that connects us all. We all feel it. So instead of just experiencing it like a, just sort of a child in a way, that cannot react to it other than fight, flight, or freeze, we want to learn to apply our higher faculties now and understand it better so that we can better understand how to counteract it. Yeah, the fear, the perpetual fear, how we can overcome it. Okay, so if I had to summarize, Sheila, what you were bringing in here was that you feeling something like a potential restriction of freedom. And with it, of course, the stuff, that you mentioned, that would keep you away from things that you love doing, that you appreciate, that you cherish. So it would also restrict love in your life, an expression of that. And at the same time, you're picking up on this mismatch of what is being propagated and what is actually being perceived in you. Yeah, so an untruth. So you are literally saying, yeah, like if I may translate this here without putting words into your mouth, that you're feeling these things such as freedom, truth, and love are on the decline. If that's what I hear you say. Is that somewhat of an okay representation for you?
Yeah, I would say that that's the perspective that's being part of the confusion. Yeah, like, in terms of trying to determine how do you counteract that, because that's not really the way, like, I want to go, and the people I end up talking to, that's not the way they want to go. But their confusion is, what do we do about it now, kind of thing.
Right. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to investigate what it is that we're perceiving, okay, so that we can better understand it. And when we can better understand it, we can also better know, or, at least try, yeah, to consciously work with it, yeah, choosing to do certain things or refraining from certain things and so forth. It allows us to discern more. Yeah? It has to do with, us stepping into this conscious choice, yeah, like as opposed to like this sort of sheeple and fearful, just sort of following the crowd. Yeah, and since you mentioned, this issue with collectivism and individualism, yeah, like how can we, unify and work together and collaborate and so forth, and yet still, see ourselves as individuated or souls, yeah, as individuals. This has to do with that. It has to do with that, because if you feel that you're not even dealing with truth, you're not even dealing with the sort of elements that are supposed to provide freedom, that are supposed to provide like what we need to connect on this empathy level, yeah, on this love level, yeah, love not as in romantic love, but love as a resonance. Yeah, if there is a mismatch here, yeah, in our societies, how can we even ever get to this place that we feel like we can do something about it? So maybe it is, as you say, somewhat of a conspiracy there, like something like trying to prevent that from happening. That's quite possible. Yeah. I'm saying maybe because, I would like to move the discussion uh, a little bit deeper, away from the political, away from, the societal, away from, like sort of what we fear, in regard to just, like, say, our lifespan. I would like to move the discussion into, more of what does that say about the future of humanity? Yeah, what is this predictive of? Yeah, where is this all headed? And this, by the way, is the first tip that I would give everybody or anybody who is concerned about the future and feels this anxiousness or this perpetuated fear, that is to go a step farther and actually, and now you hear me say a phrase that I've mentioned many times and explained it each time, that, we have to think it through. So what I mean with that is not to mentalize it, but to actually feel and think into it. Where does this go? Yeah, Cindy, you're commenting here, the polarization has gotten more polarized. Yeah, what is this predictive of? What does this indicate to us? Where do you think it's going? And I don't mean, just here, the election in the United States or something like that. No, I mean in a bigger sense.
Me, it feels like it's just going backwards.
Guys, you all believe that your soul with a body, yeah, that a spirit being that has a temporary physical experience, and you worry about things that only apply for 70 years of your experience as compared to, you know, the rest of eternity in your spirit being. There's a mismatch here. We talk about spirituality. Oh, yeah, fine. You can talk about spirituality all day long. But what about your sense of self? Is that a solid sense of self?
No.
It's a confused sense of self. So you believe in one thing, but you act in another way. All right, how do we reconcile that? Anybody, any suggestions? How do we reconcile our spiritual talk with our earthly walk?
Yes, I've always looked at it like that's why I'm here, is to practice that.
Okay, I like
kind of,
that. Yes,
no,
I
but
like that.
see
Yeah.
how that works out. Yes, we're
Yeah.
practicing.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful, Sheila, because you know, really that there's a lot of empathy, a lot of compassion, forgiveness in that belief. Yeah, because you're giving yourself the space, yeah, to figure things out. Yeah. And I full-heartedly agree with you. But in the thick of it, are we really able to translate that?
Not yet.
How often do you remember that?
I don't even think of it when I'm driving in traffic or if I'm at work.
Okay. All right. So thank you. That's the core of the problem. Okay, we're talking about self-expression and self-actualization and blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then we talk about, okay, you need to have a sort of proper sense of self for that. You need to know who you are, what you are, why you're here, and where you're going with this, right? And then self-expression is piece of cake. And then we go on to complain about our outer conditions and our this and being inhibited and hormones and whatnot. Really?
But you know what if you lose yourself along the way and you don't remember how to find yourself again? Like,
Yeah,
where do you
that's a very
start?
good point. It's a good point, Mandy. This is the you know, the section that we handle with you know, that we call trauma, that we handle with healing. Okay, so there's a certain level of purification needed. Yeah, purification in the sense of, you know, reinstating you know, our original state, if you will, you know, to be able to fully manifest that here in the physical. Yeah, so
It's like
that's
going
healing.
right back to basics. Yeah.
No, that has no. I mean, it's always about basics, and once you understand what you know, so above or as above, so below means, then you understand that there's a continual revolution. It's a continual unfoldment. Yeah, so there's no less basic or lower basic or higher basic. You know, it always is all of it. It always is all of it.
Well, I don't even know where to start right now. I feel like I'm just lost.
Well, you know, I like this overview here quite, you know, that's a really beginner's level. You know, you start at the densest level. Yeah, you start at
Yeah.
the densest level. That's why I'm showing this over and over again, because if you try to address, like, say, a problem with, you know, not knowing what to do, which is fundamentally a physical problem. Okay, doing, yeah, is a physical problem, or you know, not being able to decide it, or not, you know, being able to muster the courage or whatever to do this, then you're dealing with the physical issue. Okay, that is a physical issue, and maybe also an emotional, mental issue, because the mental, emotional, physical, they are tied together by our nervous system. Yeah, the so-called body mind. Okay, so when we find ourselves in a perpetual sort of circle of not being able to do what we want to do, then you know we got to go into physical, emotional, mental healing. Okay.
Yeah.
And I discussed this at length, you know, in this sacred self-healing general community, and the sacred self-healing steps are all about that. Okay, how to go through that process. Yeah. The biggest issue, and I mentioned it quite a few times, is that people try to address these issues with spiritual tools. This doesn't work, guys. Okay, so in order to be able, spiritual tools, you need to have some levels of purification that you've actively sought, that you've actively engaged in. And when I say purification, I don't mean this in the religious sense. I mean this in a healing sense. Yeah, you have to actively engage in healing, aka self-healing. Okay, make the steps to overcome your inner child, to overcome your shadow, to overcome your trauma, to overcome, your karmic family issues. Yeah, those are all issues that are happening here on this level. Yeah, even karmic family issues are here. Why? Because they affect you in your most fundamental way of thinking, way of feeling, and way of choosing. In your most fundamental ways of choosing.
Can I
Yeah?
ask something? Well, with the 4 bottom layers, I don't understand the difference. So I know that I need to work with the bottom 4 and consolidate in order to move upward, I guess, if you want to talk in directions. But what is the difference between, and where can I read? I don't want to take up your time here now if it's not appropriate, but the spiritual, the etheric, and the energetic. How do I learn what more of how they're different and what they are so that I know what I'm working towards?
Yeah,
I
when you're
don't
there,
understand the difference between
yeah,
them.
when you're there,
Yeah.
then you feel the difference. Okay? So differentiation and discernment always arises, in a person when they, have the they have the understanding of it. So it's not an ascension. Okay, that in and of itself is not an ascension. It's just basically a shedding of the layers.
Okay.
Yeah. So the understanding of that, I teach that here all the time, Mandy. Yeah. So there's like hundreds of hours of lectures and workshops about that. Okay. But that's beside the point, because what we just realized, yeah, is that the issue is here. Okay. The issue that you are experiencing with your self-expression is here. Yeah. Because you feel that, you're at a stage in your life where you can't do this, or, that's a belief. Okay. Yeah. That's a mental issue. Or that you emotionally not able to, do certain things or withstand certain things. Yeah, or that you physically can't muster, the life force to, take a step into courage and so forth. Those are all 3D issues. 3D issues need to be addressed on the 3D level. You can address them from a spiritual and energetic point of view once you got this sort of manageable. Yeah, once you, like I call it, master. Once you can master them, once you can feel in your body, yeah, sort of what your thoughts are doing to you, yeah, and what your emotions are then manifesting in your physical. Once you can feel that, okay, then you can move into exploring, what the spiritual can do for you, because they are, higher pay grades. Yeah, they can affect all of it. But if you're not able to discern, the emotional, psychological, yeah, from a spiritual, for example, then you can't affect that. You can't master that. And I'm not trying to take hope away from you guys here, but this is advanced spiritual understanding what we're doing here. I cannot
Jona,
talk about, like, child issues here. I can't. Yeah, that's what we have the general workshops and the online meditations and all that for. I warned everybody at the beginning of this workshops here. This particular one here, where we talk about etherization and electrification, has nothing to do with your personal issues. Okay, this has something to
Jona,
do with seeing the
sorry.
bigger picture.
Is this because I feel it in my lower chakras, and it actually feels when I go into them, it feels a lot more congruent than trying to go into my head. Does that make sense?
Like, are you referring to your state at this very moment, or are you
Yeah,
talking
like my
to?
base chakra, my sacral, and my solar plexus not bumping against them. Like they're quite aligned and it feels healthy.
You feel healthy to you? Is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah,
what you're hearing right now is resonating with you on some
completely.
fundamental level? Okay.
Yep,
Yeah. So, Sean, here's one of the issues with self-expression. Okay. It's really hard for me to understand what you're saying. Okay. Because there's like pieces of the sentence missing. Yeah. So you're making me, having to understand you. Yeah. This is already there in incongruence right there. Yeah. So there's no criticism. It's a reflection. Okay. Right there is an issue. And if we cannot form a full sentence and put effort into wanting to express what it is that we want to say, and this can take several sentences, this can take, you have all the time in the world here, but if you make somebody else, if you force somebody else to decode what you're saying, you're leaving way too much a space for error, for misunderstandings. Yeah. So keep that in mind, guys. When you have issues with self-expression, okay, put a little more effort in, how you actually say something. Is it even possible for somebody else to understand what you're saying? Or do they have to become mind readers? Yeah? Do they have to like read between the lines and assume? Why make other people assume? Why not say it? What it is that you mean? And sometimes that can be an issue around vocabulary. Yeah, so that's why we have to cover this here in this workshop series. Yeah, because if we don't have a vocabulary that sort of matches up with our self-awareness, okay, then we either need to bump up our self-awareness or we need to bump up our vocabulary. Yeah, because if there's a mismatch, yeah, between how I'm expressing myself and how I am truly feeling within, yeah, and whatever level you are experiencing it on, yeah, that's really just a matter of the range with which you can self-reflect. Okay, but if there's a mismatch between how you feel yourself from the inside out, and this ties into the sense of self, yeah. If there's a mismatch in how you perceive yourself with how you express yourself, right there, guys, is the restriction that you have. Yeah. So what can we do about it? I just said it. Two things: either increase self-awareness or increase vocabulary. And the cool thing about this is that there has been a lot of studies about this, what it does to a person when they increase their vocabulary. So what we find is that increasing our vocabulary, especially in regard to spiritual processes, okay, that we become able to express ourselves much more congruently, okay, because there are some vocabulary words that are either misconstrued or transfigured or simply absent in our modern lexicon, all right, that could express something like I believe that I'm a soul that is having a spiritual experience. Now, there's no real word for this. We have to construct a whole sentence for it, but the precision with which we do that, and like basically our striving for expressing ourselves more congruently, meaning that I actually express what I'm feeling, yeah, not just what I'm sensing, but how I'm feeling within myself, yeah, that actually increases not just the matching up of it, but also our awareness. So the more effort we put into trying to express ourselves, the better we will understand ourselves, the better we will be able to express ourselves. Do you guys get that? Yeah. So again, Sean, this was not a criticism. This was an actual hands-on practical coaching tip. All right. Okay. So here we are, and we're realizing that, we came here to discuss bigger issues and we're getting stuck in the same old stuff. All right. And if you're wondering, you know, like how this happens, well, you just saw it happening here. That's how it happens. We keep looping back to the same old stuff. So I want to challenge you here a little bit, yeah, and you know, like let all that behind you right now, okay? Because and I gave you several opportunities, you know, to think in larger terms, yeah. What do you see as the biggest problem, yeah, based on what is happening in humanity today? Who would like to answer this again? Maybe with a more congruent and more refined way of saying it. Yeah, just like literally as like online training here. What do you see as the biggest problem for humanity right now? Yeah? So bringing more truth into our daily lives and acting more congruently. So basically what is happening right now is that it's probably going backwards on one hand, and on the other hand, you know, forcing us to go into more congruence. Because the pain of us not being able to express ourselves congruently is starting to get to us. Is that the only problem that you see in the world? Okay, so what I hear you guys saying when you say, oh yeah, it's a good thing, okay, is that you have no problems with facing those adversities, that you have, you see, you can make sense of it, you know where it's going, and you're okay with it. That's what you're expressing right now. Okay.
Well, and yeah, I think that's where the confusion part that I was talking about earlier comes in, because on one perspective, I think people, overall humanity, is sensing that there could be something good, no, but they're just confused about how to get there. So do you have people arguing about, do we go backwards? Do we go forward? What does it look like? We're afraid of it. And, you know, so there's all of these things that go on, and then it's, how do you express that? And everybody's got an opinion, and it's all pretty different right now. And so, yeah, can that end up being good if we can find like the bridge that you're talking about that can help people actually make that connection? Then,
well,
yeah, it can be a good thing.
On a personal level, we've already resolved that self-awareness.
Right.
Yeah, developing a proper sense of self. Okay, there is no other answer. On a humanity level, we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
And that's, yeah, I mean, to me, that's the similarity that we were talking about too, as far as humanity having that same possibility, but what that actually ends up looking like, it's, yeah, I mean, I don't even know how you would predict what that would become, because there can be so many different things it could turn into, depending on how all the individuals, you know, deal with ourselves.
You mean others?
Yes, all of us. Yes, as a humanity, when we're talking humanity, it's not just about me. It's, you know, yes, that's my part and my piece, but that's also a matter of trusting, maybe, or whether everyone's doing the same thing or not, and at what different levels, and then that begins
so
to
if
be.
other people wouldn't do it, then you would change your mind, maybe?
No, I mean that's what I'm saying is, individually I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing, but be me by myself cannot change the course of humanity. If others in humanity aren't, I mean, if that's the nature and course of humanity is.
Yeah, but you guys all got this right. I mean, we're all connected, and humanity is not outside of us. Okay.
Right.
And you guys all talk about the people that you're in contact with, the people that you're impacted by it, right? Your social circle. So you don't believe that one person, you know, breaking out of the mold or doing something, you know, that feels true, that feels loving, that feels congruent, can have an impact on other people?
Well, maybe that's part of what.
Hugely. Go ahead, Sheila, sorry.
No, I think that's part of what I was expressing as far as an old belief pattern that I
Mm-hmm.
don't, and to me, that's part of what I found personally as part of my own incongruences is there was deep down, I didn't believe that. Deep down, I believed it. Absolutely, we can have impacts and we can change things. But outside influences that start to peck away at that optimism, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
it can, and it eventually takes a toll. I mean, the line of work I do, and those things have shifted recently into this whole other arena that I've been, hoping for and what have you. But that's on a personal note. But so I can feel how, yeah, those are the things that can be these tides that can absolutely change.
The winds of change, right? So
Yes.
there's, externals. Those are externals.
Right.
Those are the weather
But
conditions.
but as you develop or understand, like for ourselves, where are we fitting in with that? Yes, that can absolutely impact.
So maybe that's the solution to the dilemma that you brought up earlier, Sheila. The sort of finding your individual expression, sort of following an impulse to individualize or to individuate, yeah, and at the same time, also recognizing the collective task, yeah, that you're fulfilling as you're doing that. Maybe that's the solution.
Yeah, I think right.
Yeah, maybe it's one person at a time, one soul at a time.
Right.
Yeah, it's most likely it is that way because all of you guys express that belief already without being aware of it. You keep saying we're all connected. Yeah, we all got to unify and da da da. And even recognize that, part of the issue with unifying with others is that we're not unified within. Yeah. So it's not really mystical. It's not mystical at all. In fact, it's not even spiritual. That's all material. That's all stuff that refers to your 3D material life only, guys. Have you noticed that? You're just talking about your life here right now. And that's fine. Okay. But you got to be aware that this is the perspective that you are talking from. Okay. Yeah. So when you say something, when you talk about us unifying and coming together and having issues finding the right people, that align with you, that sort of match up, with in terms of similar values and worldviews and things like that. Well, you're never ever going to find them, and that's just the obvious if you're not truthfully expressing yourself. So there can be no confusion about that. If I'm pretending to be someone that I'm not, how can I expect to find people that align with who I am secretly down somewhere, inside, that I'm sort of protecting and hiding and building walls around? Yeah, so that's a prerequisite, the understanding of that. Yeah, that we understand, like when we complain about things and when we talk about how hard it is and all that we're understanding what perspective we're coming from. Do you guys get my point? Yeah, that's the first step in differentiating. Okay, I'm talking about my physical material life here as a human. Yeah, and my human 3D experience. So then let me ask you, what about your spiritual experience? You just said, Sheila, well, then maybe it comes down to belief or faith. Oh, you've already expressed your belief, namely that you are primarily a spirit being that is having a physical experience in order to, like, I'm just putting things together here that we've discussed, in order to figure something out, in order to practice something, like a training program, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what are we training for? What are we supposed to figure out?
Well, I guess the way for me, I'm connecting it like if our individual soul selves are determining what we're, I guess to use some of our other words, to be congruent with what we are expressing for ourselves individually, and it does affect other people. So if I'm on my right, quote unquote, track, for lack of better words, right now, and that's congruent, and other people sense that and feel that, and you can feel the shift or the winds of change, if you will, and you move into that. To me, that's also how I look at this lifetime. So physically in my life, I look at that as this is also giving me those winds of change into my future life. So,
Okay,
whatever, right?
So what you're supposed to figure out, according to your belief, is how to express yourself congruently.
Right. Because not only does that affect the others of the whole in this current lifetime that I'm experiencing, but it affects me individually in my future lifetimes.
Future lifetimes, or your true being, your spiritual
or wherever
being.
I go next. Yes, my spiritual being, wherever my spiritual being goes next. Yes, correct.
Okay, so what I hear you say, Sheila, and I'm just really laying this out, is that you're saying that the purpose of life is to figure out how to gain a proper sense of self and to translate that into the physical. Yeah, basically express yourself congruently. Wonderful.
Right.
I would fully subscribe to that definition of purpose of life. Okay, so is that something that others here can connect with?
Yes, that was what I was actually trying to get to. Thanks, Sheila.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody? Do you guys see it similarly? Similarly, are we here people who align in some areas at least? The bigger sort of purpose of life. That's a pretty big agreement.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, you can add things, you can, restrict things, like please feel free to do this at any time, if you would like to add something. But training program, yeah, in order to figure out how to best, bring ourselves into expression, yeah, in our true self. I would subscribe to that as a definition of purpose of life. And there's obviously, multi-layered meaning to that.
But also how it translates into the afterlife.
Okay, so let's add that. Well, Sheila said it. I just abbreviated it a bit too much to get that across. Yeah. Based on, seeing yourself as a spirit being primarily, that is having a physical experience. That to me includes that already, because anything, beyond this physical life experience, 70, 80 years, would then mean the afterlife. As well as the pre-life, by the way. Yeah, so just because we in our human form experience time as something that elapses, okay, doesn't necessarily mean that we perceive it that way as a spirit being, just on a side note. Does that, Sheila, does that feel right? Does that represent what you meant? Okay, so here we are. Okay, once we spent an hour and a half on just defining that and wiggling our way through, all these like 3D restrictions that we have, where we've already agreed fundamentally that we have a whole lifetime for that, probably even multiple lifetimes. Does anybody believe that we have multiple lifetimes of this earthly training program to figure things out?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we're good to go. I mean, as far as your like sort of esoteric principles of life is concerned, you got one major, concept down, and that is that, the physical life in perspective with, your overall sort of soul life, yeah, the soul that you are, is just a tiny little part of the experience. Even though we can't fully prove that, at least when we're in our unconscious state, we don't have an inner experience of our soul life. You guys are, part of that small population, part of population that actually has an inner experience of their soul life. Is that correct? Am I just assuming that?
You're correct.
Okay, so yeah, you have a sense for that spirit being that is in you, your soul, yeah, or maybe true self as sort of a pre-state of that. Okay, so this is really indicative of what we do. Okay, so we already have sort of fundamentals down. Okay, we already understand, ourselves, at least in theory, yeah, as something bigger than just the 3D, and yet we waste all our time on discussing, sort of the evident, yeah, stuff that everybody has to deal with. So coming back to the one of the initial questions, what that is predictive of, what is your outlook on humanity? Let's say for the next 500 years or 1,000 years. Anybody? I mean, humanity, according to you, is in a state of confusion. Okay, check. I think we can all see that. About purpose of life, about, being human altogether.
I think there's definitely going to be some sense of a different perspective. I don't know how that this can end without some kind of different perspective. Either,
Like a paradigm shift or something like that.
yeah. I mean,
What do you think could bring that about? Seen from today's perspective, what can you imagine that could bring about a massive paradigm shift in the way we see ourselves?
Oh, I mean, any number of the old thought processes of, well, if where humans came from, or or were there really old civilizations that actually knew things that we have forgotten, or things like that. There's some parts of that I think if we were to find out that there was a whole lot of information that has really already been here, that would make things quite different.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. So an investigation into our origins.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Isn't that what we would do if we would look at an animal species, and first we would just observe them, right? See what they spend all their day with,
Right.
And then we would just describe it, and then we would say, okay, how did that evolve? Where did they come from? Why are they having this weird mating dance? Okay, what's the purpose of them making these weird sounds or emitting these weird neurotransmitters? Okay, yeah. So we would do that with the natural world that we are observing, because that's what we're trained to do, to describe how something works, how something is. We've gotten good at this. Science got good at describing how something is. Do you guys understand what science is not good at and actually continually fails to do?
Humanizing it.
No. There's a very important training of higher thinking right now. It has to do with logic. It has to do with how we gain insights. Nature science as it exists right now is very good at describing how things work. But it cannot answer a much bigger question.
Well, yeah, why things work.
Yeah, and what the original point.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, Sheila. An investigation into our origins, an investigation into, sort of the bigger plan, right? I mean, with some of the species, it's wonderful, how science can paint a picture now, how, they evolved from like just ocean creatures to amphibians to reptiles and then birds and mammals. Okay, that's fascinating stuff. Yeah, so if I compare the state of science today with 40 years ago when I was in college, or a little bit less than 40 years, okay, it's amazing. But really good at at least sort of assuming, or somehow inferring how that all developed. But we know quite little, actually, about the origin of humans. There still is a paradigm in our science that we basically evolved from primates. That's a paradigm that's about 150 years old, okay, that doesn't match up with your guys' beliefs, just so you know. Just so you know, because if you see yourself as a soul that is having a physical experience, okay, yeah, well, your soul aspect, your spiritual, the spirit being that is in you is your primary being. Darwin's evolutionary theory cannot answer that. Yeah? Survival of the fittest. You are aware of that, right? It cannot find that. That's why you're so confused, because your beliefs don't match up with the current paradigm. What is the current paradigm based on? Okay, why is it that the current scientific paradigm cannot explain the origin of humans? And don't get me wrong, you know this about me, I come from science. The answer is pretty simple, because the current physical paradigm is based on material only. It doesn't regard anything that is subtle. I mean, it's only been roughly 200 years that we're even regarding invisible things such as electricity, magnetism, light, warmth, as physical, as material energies and forces. That we are able to describe them mathematically and so forth. Yeah, like in the history of humanity, from what we know right now, okay, which is probably a couple 100,000 years, that does not describe any of our evolutionary path. Doesn't. Those are physical energies. The reason why the current physical paradigm cannot explain these aspects of our spiritual origin is because it is reduced to the physical only. And when we talk about the physical, we're also including the emotional and the mental, because those are linked together. They're hardwired in us through our autonomous nervous system, through electricity.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask, actually, Jona, because when we think about answering physical progression, if you will, of like the physical species of something, and then I was just writing down too, being in the field of like mental health, if you will, and how much that even has shifted in terms of what people are willing to accept for mental health and emotional well-being and wellness and things like that. But I also wrote down brain activity and the connection with that. Then, like you were saying, neurotransmitters.
Yeah, that's where it's going right now. Okay.
Right.
So it's still materializing. Yeah.
Right.
The vast majority of our being. Yeah. Breaking it all down to, some kind of neurological processes that are controlled by neurotransmitters, that are controlled by hormones, that are controlled by metabolic functions. That is a materialistic view of the human only. It's reduced. Now we already know, here in this audience, we already know that we are more than just a particle. We're more than just a body. We already know that. How do we know that? Just to double check here. How do we know that? How do you know that?
it's a different inner sense. Like, I mean, how you actually explain that to somebody else is, I'm not sure that I personally
No, I'm
formulated the
here.
words to describe it. Yeah, as far as the personal words to describe it, but it's the type of thing that doesn't feel like we have the words for it yet.
No, in our current paradigm, we don't have the words for it.
Right.
And the reason for that is that our current paradigm only really uses vocabulary words that describe our being in a material sense.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look at ancient scripture and stuff like that, you know, different languages, you know, and so forth to get inspired there. And if we do that, then we find that, you know, Vedic scripture, Persian scripture, Aramaic scripture, Hebrew scripture, Roman, Greek, Greco-Roman scripture, and Egyptian scripture, Buddhic scripture was way more advanced when it comes to those spiritual terms. So there's a regress in a way. Yeah, we sort of despiritualized ourselves. Yeah. So with these definitions of our physical universe, yeah, that have come to us in the last, well, it started like 500-600 years ago. Yeah, when the church basically allowed, you know, science to coexist. Yeah, but you know, like the laws of thermodynamics and the Newtonian laws and things like that. That's like 150, 80, you know, 200 years old. That's relatively new. And in that, you know, if you look back the last 150, 180, 200 years, we can see a tendency. And the tendency is that we perceive ourselves more and more as material beings only. You guys confirmed this for me earlier. How many times a day do you remind yourself that you are actually a spirit being? Rarely ever. You forget it because you get pulled into your 3D physicality, which includes the way you emotionally and mentally perceive what is happening to you, the way you contextualize it. Okay, so there's something about the vocabulary, and I mentioned this in the beginning, yeah, that we need to investigate. Okay, I just basically gave you the background and told you that, you know, it is no surprise that it becomes increasingly harder for us to express ourselves because the paradigm that we are in, yeah, and obviously also the expressions, the 3D expressions of it, they're driving us into materializing ourselves more and more, seeing ourselves in a machine-like way, seeing ourselves as, you know, just sort of slightly better computers, seeing ourselves as sort of a consciousness that consists of a neural network. How often have you heard that when you watched, you know, docu series about, you know, the consciousness and how it works? That it's all sort of broken down to, you know, neurons and electrical impulses. Maybe nowadays in a slightly more advanced version, you know, including, yeah, the force of light. Cindy, you're on the right track here. Your answer is the only answer that I take for a conscious answer. And that is because I can feel it. Okay, so here we have the word feel. Okay, that in the English language is often confused with sort of something emotional, really isn't. You can sense it. You can feel it. Cindy, Sheila, you said that too. It's a different sense. Okay, and that is very real to you, right?
Yeah, and there isn't a word that I can.
No, we've already established that, right? There's a lack of
Yeah.
vocabulary. Okay,
Yeah.
so that could be remedied, right? I mean, that's not really that hard. Once you get it, that it's a matter of, you know, giving yourself, you know, the freedom to express it, you know, maybe inventing new words, yeah, Or as a, scientist, I would go back to like studying all the words that have been used in the past. Yeah. And sort of trying to create some kind of lexicon, that works for me. Yeah. Whether it's energy body or energy centers or chakras or, whatever the words are that help us to navigate that. Yeah. That work for us. Okay. So we do that investigation. All of you guys have done that, maybe without being aware of it. Yeah, you've tried to find, teachers or books or teachings, okay, that somehow helped you to describe what it is that you're experiencing, that helped you to understand yourself better. Great. You're on your path. Yeah, that's the path. We've already worked that out. The path is to develop a greater sense of self, to develop an I, yeah, an individuated experience of yourself in the face of external outer adversities. What are these external, what's the nature of these adversities? 3D life. The restrictions that come with, experiencing yourself as a sort of a, like a material being that has an expiration date on. Yeah. And trying to like psychically survive the fact that you know that you're going to die one day. So how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile that with your understanding of yourself as a spirit being, as a soul being, with the body, with the going through this training program?
You mean how do like do we feel like that's like we're okay with that? Is that like that when I'm thinking
how do you reconcile, getting pulled into the, your petty problems, right? I mean, not to judge them or something like that, knowing that it's about something completely different.
okay,
And,
yeah.
and knowing that there's adversities here that are working against you, or not you personally maybe, but just in general, yeah, that you have to overcome. Maybe that's the training program.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it's all about. I could use, terms like they use in the Matrix movies, yeah, like that your reality that you experience is actually the illusion. Yeah. Just to steer the conversation a little bit more into like, how we perceive or how we can perceive reality in different ways. Maybe it's all about that. Maybe it's all about, getting red pilled. Yeah. As they say in the Matrix movies.
Yeah, and it feels like that's the area that is that's the part where we always would talk in different other places about being distracted, forgetting, and the things that
yeah, but we keep
because
wasting our time talking about the same thing over and over again, and we miss the point.
Right, but that is the point. But that's the point to me at this moment, which is by continuously doing that, that is the loop, and that is what we end up doing the whole entire lifetime. And and so to look at that as how do we, your question about how do we reconcile that with like future or spirit part? I think that ends up being
become aware
of it later and go, gee, what did I do with my life? Right? That's where you have people actually ask that question at the end. What was I doing?
Yeah. And when we further progress here into like the meaning of things and what actually happens after death and so forth, it will be a big eye opener for you. Okay, but we always need to bring it back to like how we perceive things, and that is always sort of the start of the conversation. Okay, we have to become more aware of the perspective that we're having when we are talking about things. Okay, so there's an aspect of increasing our vocabulary. There's an aspect of, talking about things so that we can figure out how to express certain things, yeah, and find the right vocabulary. So that's the purpose of us coming together and sharing, yeah. But then comes a point where we have to stop talking about all the adversities because they are already clear. We have to start a new conversation, namely how to overcome it. Yeah? How to, frame that so that it can make sense to us why we're experiencing the adversities. Why we experience something like inner child stuff, relationship problems, money problems. Yeah, we have to stop talking about that we have them and need to start conversations about how to overcome them. And I'm not talking about law of attraction and stuff like that. I'm talking about asking ourselves that. Yeah, we talked about, manifestation, conscious manifestation on many different occasions, and how, when we keep talking about the adversities, the things that are working against us, and never really move out of that and find the courage to break the cycle, how we're actually energizing it. Yeah. So by constantly sort of telling ourselves that this is the reason why we can't do this, and this is the reason why we can't do this, we are trapped. We're entrapped. We're tethering us. We're aligning us to the adversities. And by the way, yeah, this is something that we'll find out later. Also, the forces behind them. Do you understand where I'm going with this? I'm not talking about, like positive thinking and that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the spiritual reality of what we're doing, what we're engaging with, what we're paying attention to all day long. All day long, we're obsessing about things that are material only. And then we wonder, and material again here, based on the paradigm and not money only, the paradigm, the material paradigm that we were trained, that we were spoon-fed to see ourselves as. We're trained, we're conditioned to see ourselves as physical 3D beings only. You see? And once we investigate our true nature, our true origin, not just sort of, like, how humans have evolved from here to here and blah, blah, blah. No. Our bigger evolutionary story. Where we're from, where did we come from before we had this physical experience here, that training program, and where we're going to. Wouldn't that make sense? Especially in context with developing a more proper, more solid sense of self, knowing what it means to be a soul, knowing what it means to be human, knowing what a soul has to go through in order to materialize in this spirit, in this physical form, and what happens when that gets reversed, when it spiritualizes again, when it etherizes. These are the kind of questions that I want to answer here in this advanced spiritual workshop series. Yeah, these are the things that we should be concerned about, okay, if we feel the truth of our being, the truth of our real being, so to speak, the soul that we are seeking to individuate, that we're seeking to define. Then we need to ask these questions. We need to ask ourselves where we're from. What's the process that we go through? How does that happen? How do we get from a soul to a physical body? And what happens when our physical body dies? How does that go from here to like the soul being again? Wouldn't you want to know that? Isn't that something that we should know? Well, you can even think as far as like learn in school, okay, to make good choices. Not to be able to remind ourselves, you know what this is actually all about here. That's a way of thinking, guys. That's a way of free thinking that I'm demonstrating here. I'm not giving answers and I'm not propagating any particular spiritual teaching. I'm just saying, like, if you want to be a spiritual person and if you understand yourself as a spirit being that's having a physical experience, you might as well want to know what all that entails. Does it mean that we have to have a proper, vocabulary for, astral happenings, yeah, or etheric happenings? No, not necessarily. But we definitely can't see ourselves, as a material being only. That does not go together. So really what I'm talking about here is something that we've already intuitively figured out, namely that all that we are, sort of representing here, that we can perceive ourselves as, and the more a person investigates the nature of their own self, the more access they will have to, these other bodies, so to speak, the subtle energies that are tethered to our physical, which we could, I think, assume, have something to do with our spirit being. Yeah, I think that you guys all have an intuitive understanding about that your soul's kind of always with you, right? It's not something that is out there somewhere and that is gone and that you return to. It is something that is always in you, because that's what you're talking about when you're saying that you feel it. Yeah, you feel the presence of something. You feel the presence of your own spirit being in you. And many of you, also the presence of other spirit beings. So this is sort of what I want to drive home with you here. Yeah, that these incongruencies that you experience, they have to do with you not actually thinking it through and not doing a proper investigation of all of that. This has nothing to do with religion or anything like that. That has to do with, like really thinking it and feeling it through with the whole of you. Yeah? And many of us resort to descriptions such as differentiating the different ways of experiencing myself. So I can say physically I feel like this, emotionally I feel like this, mentally I feel like this. On a sort of a spiritual level I feel this, and on an etheric level I feel this, and overall, sort of energetically I feel this. Many of you can already do that. You're already differentiating, sort of these different realms, these different sort of perception of realities within yourself. But now you need to get this a step farther. Okay. So if you can perceive yourself, in these different realities at the same time, that means that, your spirit being, your soul being inhabits the same space as your physical being. That means that there's a spiritual reality to everything that is happening in your physical life, 3D physical material life. And going back to what we established in the beginning, that what we express on the outside is merely just the outer expression of an inner process. Okay, so there's some kind of spiritual process going on inside of you, okay, that you are following, that you are feeling, that you're sensing, that you receive impulses from, yeah, that makes you strive for certain things, that makes you want to grow, that makes you want to understand, that makes you want to, be happier, be more fulfilled in life, to bring more love, to bring more truth, to bring more freedom in your life. Those are all spiritual impulses. They're immaterial. Yeah. Inner peace, happiness, joy, love, truth, freedom. Those are immaterial aspects. Those are spiritual aspects of your life. And for you to feel the impulse to, improve that, to bring in higher levels of, authenticity and congruence into your life, and, to somehow reconcile that. So the impulse for needing to reconcile something here, okay, that too is a spiritual impulse. And that is what this training program is about. Yeah? Overcoming adversities, okay, and investigating the true nature of who you are. Yeah? Developing an I, yeah? A spiritual name tag, if you will. Yeah? I am, Jona Bryndis, a soul self. I am a conscious, awakened, yeah, soul self. I know who I am. Do you understand the level of thinking that we need to energize more in our lives to be able to, well, I guess, graduate from this training program at some point? Now we're going to graduate, from certain classes eventually. Everybody experiences, the pain of repetition. So, that's sort of built in. Yeah, if we don't move forward, if we keep experiencing the same adversities over and over again, eventually, I can promise that to you, there'll be a shift in you that says, wait a minute, I've had enough of this. Yeah, be it frustration, or be it grief, or be it fear, or, pride, or whatever it is that motivates you finally to overcome those adversities. And that's different for each and every one of us. So you already know, and that out of your own experience, yeah, that eventually, you can even say that for humanity, eventually we're all gonna grow, right? Maybe we have to go through a few more classes. Maybe we have to go through, the according experience, life experience, physical, material life experiences, to finally muster the courage to overcome, these adversities. But eventually, even if it's forced, you guys mentioned that there's a sort of like a forced awakening going on right now through all the discomfort. Yeah. However, it's going to happen, is going to happen. Does that represent your belief? Can you subscribe to that? Can you say, yes, I believe that on a long enough timeline, humans will grow, will evolve, or continue to evolve even?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, that's important that we clarify this for ourselves, Yeah, so maybe not within the next 5 years, maybe it has to get worse before it can get better. But you're capable of feeling that there is a continued evolution going on. There's something like a greater plan, if you will, that is going on. So, in a way, that is the first sort of step into a real-time experience of, something like a greater plan, without, mystifying it, or without making it a matter of religion. You don't have to be part of any political group or any religion or anything to come to that kind of insight. There's something that gives me the impulse, okay, to ask questions, to grow, to wanting to understand myself. In fact, most of you guys here listening to this discussion, almost experience it as the strongest impulse in your life, in spite of all the adversities. Namely, the impulse to investigate. What is all this? Yeah. You want to understand. Do you understand what strong power that is working through you there? I bet many of you have gotten into a lot of issues in your life because of it. Right? After all, we spent an hour and a half talking about that. Yeah. It's funny when you shift the perspective. Yeah? Then it's easy to laugh about those things. Yeah? But at the end of the day, okay, so we on one hand experience that curiosity, yeah, and inspiration, okay, to investigate all these things. So clearly it's in our potential, because if we didn't have the potential to even formulate the question, yeah, we wouldn't even think about those things. So that's what we typically describe as people that are unconscious. They're not asking questions. They're not asking these kind of questions that we are asking. They're not even striving for, like growth in the sense as, we've defined it here. Yeah, like some kind of spiritual growth, something that, makes us become more aligned and more congruent. Those are spiritual terms. Yeah. Something that, brings more love, more truth, more freedom in our lives. That's literally what distinguishes an unconscious person from a conscious person. A conscious person doesn't have to know the answers. A conscious person just has to ask the questions. Yeah. So the mere fact that you have questions and that you do feel confusion, yeah, and that some of you more than others, but that you do feel the incongruence, yeah, that it's not matching up, that's already a sign that you've graduated from some previous training programs. Are you guys aware of that? It's a discriminator. It distinguishes you from others. Not that it doesn't make you better people or anything like that. It doesn't make you better. It just means that you must have gone through some training program already. Yeah, that's maybe the accomplishment from previous lifetimes. And here you are. And I'm asking all these uncomfortable questions. And I'm nailing you down, and I'm asking you, to think deeper and to feel more into it and to ask more questions. Why? Because it's in your nature. So if you feel stuck or if you feel confused, you got to ask more questions, but not the kind of questions that your ego asks. What do questions sound like that come from your ego?
How do I make more money? How do I survive longer? How do I outdo this one and that one?
Yeah. I mean, most people's, ego questions sound even a little more forceful. They don't actually ask how.
More
What is your
why did that happen to me? Or
yeah? Why
what
didn't
could
I
I
do
have
this
done
earlier?
better? Why didn't yes. Yeah.
Why didn't I see this? Why do I always need to mess up? Why? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah. The wrong questions. So the ego might ask the wrong questions. And that's, the root of the confusion. Okay. So what's your takeaway here from this first out of 6 workshops, okay, in which we are going to investigate, how this is all connected in the cosmos, how, we came to being, how, where we came from, where we're going, what these training programs look like, why we have to go through them, what basically the goal of all that is. Yeah, those are all the questions that I would like to work out with you here in this workshop series. But what is your takeaway from this particular first investigation?
To allow myself to actually be more curious, to ask more questions.
All right, so this, for me as a teacher here in this position, that's a feeling of success, Sean. If I have
Thank you.
motivated you to ask more questions, okay,
And
then
to go into my feelings and thoughts more, not just find the
okay,
answer, because I know that that's my impulse and it's not what I want.
okay. So wonderful. All right, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you
You know,
so
because
much.
that means I've achieved, you know, part of my sort of scholarly goal here. Okay,
I
yeah,
have
like
a smile on my face. I just
okay.
feel like, wow, I've got scope to work with. Thank you.
Thank you. Other takeaways or similar?
I agree with the questions, like being and the other thing that was a big one is being the perspective. I like talking about that because
Hmm.
that really set with me in terms of it's deeper than other trainings and things that we've talked about as far as like
Hmm.
being aware, you know, where you're coming from and why and all of those things. There was something about the way we were talking about the perspective at the moment that really sat with me. Like it made me think about my days, and it
Hmm.
really made me think about, okay, my perspective really is, despite all of this training or the different things I do to be aware of myself and my inner self and all of this, I still keep coming at it from the daily perspective.
Hmm.
And I can still do that, but I'm not shifting it in the way that I keep thinking that I want to, I guess. And then I think that I have figured out how to do it, and then I just don't do it. And so
Hmm.
anyway, the perspective piece was really a big one for me. I really like that.
And that too is a you know is something that makes me feel like I did my job, okay?
Mhm.
Because I already know that the answer is in shifting the perspective.
Yeah.
All right, so if I can motivate you to do that more often, you know, in your daily life, okay, then you know I've done a good job. Yeah, because this is really the level of subtlety that we need to go into, namely understanding that if we shift our perspective, our perception changes. Yeah,
Yeah,
so if
and what I liked about how you said it though, in this particular, and that's why I actually joined on to this one, was because I'm very intrigued and curious about, I want this spiritual thing, and it's like elusive to me. and
Mhm.
and and I'm and that part is what really hit me with, it's more than just changing my perspective the ways that we used to talk about it. It's really about this spiritual perspective that I want to learn how to do that, because that's what will help me get through the day the way I want to get through my day.
Exactly. That's how you already at least partially understand yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
And really, you know, what you know, what I see, what you can see now is that, well, you're just struggling with the implementation. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yeah. And
Right.
yes, and I like, Sheila, how you word this. You know, you use a vocabulary that feels, you know, full of compassion, you know, like understanding, you know, that we kind of have to contend with that. Yeah, that's a part of our sort of straddling these two worlds. Yeah, that this is part of our human condition. And I think that's
Right.
really important to take that home. Yeah, that you
Yeah.
understand, you know, that your struggles, yeah, are part of your human condition, but that they also somehow, we haven't answered that fully yet, you know, and can't fully understand it yet, but that there's somehow some kind of training program for us, right? We can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there is something there. We're picking up on it. Yeah, it changes our perspective from, you know, just experiencing ourselves as this bag of flesh that is going, you know, through 70, 80 years of life experience with an expiration date, and, you know, just sort of being sort of randomly colliding atoms, you know, fed by electricity, right? Because that's how science defines the being human. All right. That there's more to us. Okay. Yeah. So that's how, we should regard that. Yeah. If we want to like resolve some of these adversities that we are struggling with, because many, if not most of what you are experiencing as the biggest sort of pain or contradiction is the cognitive dissonance that you have. Yeah, hearing your ego mind talking that is only concerned about, the physical, because it cannot think beyond itself. The ego only exists, yeah, basically tied to your physical experience. Okay. Yeah, so that's why the ego is not really concerned about the afterlife. It will not experience it. But your soul will, and that that you're about, to that you're in the process of refining and purifying and ennobling and making more conscious, that will experience the afterlife. And you're not the first one that feels that, because if you go look in ancient scripture, it's full of it. Most of, the writings in, our sort of ancient human history are about the afterlife, guys. Have you ever thought about it?
Not really, but that's, yeah,
It's all
I guess
about it. Yeah.
True.
It's all about what happens after we die, and maybe also a little bit about where we were before we came here. Yeah, and the most positive outlook is that there's some kind of recurring cycle, right? Reincarnation and so forth. Actually, most spiritual teachings kind of agree on that. They use different words, but they're kind of seeing life as a cycle in a way. So why not talk about it? Why all of a sudden in this day and age, okay, this is a poo-poo topic? You need to ask these questions. Do you know why? Is that something that you can take home as a takeaway? Was I able to explain that sufficiently enough that you understand why it's harder for us to do this in a reconciliation, to even express it in words? Because it's being gradually cut out of our awareness by seeing and defining ourselves, being human, as a material being, with an ego mind and some mysterious electricity only. We're reducing ourselves to that physical experience and therefore lose access to the spiritual experience of ourselves. That's the materialization of life, okay, that is distancing us from the bridge. It's making it harder. And that's why you guys are experiencing yourselves in a state of confusion and incongruence. Who of you has the courage to say, oh, well, I'm not really concerned about what my coworkers think about me. I'm more concerned about my afterlife. But really, that's what you
Me,
believe. Yeah, but that's what
I
you're believing in. That's what you're believing. You believe that you have an afterlife.
yeah.
And that afterlife is probably much longer than that physical life here.
Yeah, and the pondering of what the neighbours and this, and you've mentioned before what they think and believe of me. It's not important to me as much as this what's going on now. So
Right.
thank
So
you.
then let's give it the rightful place, guys, in our
Okay.
life. Let's, begin by asking questions, because that is how humans do that. That's how humans execute their consciousness. Yeah? That is a higher pay grade than your ego mind. Let's not Let's stop asking questions. Why is this happening to me? And why didn't I do this earlier? Why didn't I say, no when I meant no, instead of saying yes when I meant no? Yeah? Stop bickering about the adversities. Start executing the power in you that can overcome them. And the more you execute them, it's just like your muscles, the more access, the stronger they become. Yeah? The more access you gain, the easier it will become for you to develop these higher faculties that you have. So that's basically here the end of our first workshop. Because I chose to do this in discussion style, which I think is very important, not just for us individually, but also for those, just listening. Yeah. We'll probably have to plan in, at least 2 hours, if not 2.5 hours per workshop. Yeah. And again, you have to be willing to go down the rabbit hole, but in a structured way, in a conscious way. Why? Because if you don't do this in a structured and conscious way, you're going to get caught in the windings and the darkness of all these rabbit holes that are there. Some real, some not, some true, some more true than others. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for sharing this, Cindy. Can you say it into the microphone?
I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm just listening. Drooling, basically. I wrote, "You are so motivating. Thank you so much. I've been waiting probably lifetimes for this series. Thank you."
You've been preparing for it. Okay. So thank you for seeing this as motivating. I'm sure that there are many people who see this as challenging or, feel agitated or frustrated or, attacked. Okay. But that is part of the adversity that we need to overcome. So I'm happy to hear that, at least for some of you, it's motivating, yeah, to challenge yourself and to go beyond your own loops of thinking. Okay. Yeah. Executing the higher thinking. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, guys. I see you again probably in about 4 to 6 weeks. Okay. So we'll have the Sacred Self Healing workshop series about building the bridge, which is, a less deep level going on simultaneously. And sort of every 2 episodes or so, I am going a little deeper here for, this advanced understanding. Yeah. So there's plenty of platforms here within the Sacred Self Healing community, be it in our online meditations and talks, that we're offering there, or in form of in form of doing energy transmissions as we go, which help with that process tremendously. Yeah, because they allow you to integrate, your spirit being into your daily life with, roughly 1 or 2 sessions a week. Okay, where you actually allocate that time. Yeah, like going to a gym, yeah, for your soul. Yeah? So that's really what the Energy Training Club is all about, is that you're executing it, that you're training that muscle, you're connecting with your spiritual self and communicate, yeah, commune and communicate, connect with it, so that you get a better sense, yeah, for that part of you that you all believe is who you truly are. Where you came from and where you will go to. And in the process, we will learn a bit more about how all this comes about and what this sort of greater evolutionary plan is and so forth, which all serves for you to better understand yourself, yeah, and to hopefully also become more confident in expressing yourself. Yeah, giving you vocabulary, giving you a little bit of insight, yeah, and just enough information for you to feel motivated to ask more questions. Yeah, so please, please, please have questions. Send them to me before our workshops. Ask them during workshops. Yeah, send them to me after workshops. Yeah, please execute, your higher faculty by using your consciousness, yeah, and investigating all these things that many of you are still mystifying. Yeah. All right. I'm very excited, and just like you, Cindy, I'm very motivated. So I was waiting for being able to dive into these deeper aspects of our journey for over a decade now. Okay, so let's do this together. I'm excited, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye. Stay conscious. See you soon.